Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the news from SABA satellite channel from Marib. Here are tonight's top stories.
Prime Minister calls for greater humanitarian support in talks with the UN delegation.
Yemen urges Security Council to expand sanctions and take firmer action against destabilizing actors.
Also, UN envoy urges release of detainees in Houthi prisons and welcomes government reforms.
Welcome back and to details. We begin with humanitarian affairs as the Prime Minister Shaya Zandani has called for greater international support to address Yemen's humanitarian needs and strengthen the transition from emergency relief to sustainable development. During a meeting in Aden with a delegation from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the Prime Minister reviewed current humanitarian conditions and ways to enhance coordination between the government and United Nations agencies. As Zandani praised OCHA's role in supporting efforts to elevate humanitarian suffering and reaffirmed the government's commitment to facilitating the work of humanitarian organizations to ensure assistance reaches the most vulnerable communities across the country. The Prime Minister also stressed the importance of mobilizing additional international funding for Yemen's humanitarian response plan while placing greater emphasis on development projects that improve basic services and contribute to long-term economic stability. For her part, the delegation reaffirmed the United Nations commitment to working closely with the government and international partners to strengthen humanitarian response efforts and expand assistance to vulnerable populations.
And on government reforms, Prime Minister Shaya Zandani reaffirmed the government's commitment to combating corruption, describing it as a national priority requiring coordinated efforts across all state institutions. During a meeting in Aden with the chairperson of the National Authority for Combating Corruption, Afrah Badwailan, the Prime Minister reviewed ongoing cooperation between the government and the authority and efforts to strengthen transparency, accountability and oversight mechanisms. Zandani stressed that the government remains committed to implementing financial and administrative reforms, enhancing regulatory and accountability systems, and creating the conditions necessary for oversight bodies to perform their duties independently and effectively. For her part, Badwailan briefed the Prime Minister on the authority's activities, ongoing programs, and key challenges, including efforts to investigate complaints and follow up on corruption cases in accordance with the law, to strengthen public confidence in state institutions and promote good governance.
The National Conference on Partnership and Integration between the government and local authorities has concluded in Aden with a series of recommendations to strengthen decentralization, improve public services, and enhance coordination between central and local government institutions. The conference urged the government to accelerate financial and economic reforms and implement measures to strengthen local development and service delivery. Among its key recommendations, the conference called for granting provincial branches of ministries and state institutions broader executive powers, adjusting procurement ceilings to reflect current economic conditions and inflation rates, and ensuring a more equitable allocation for local revenues. Local Administration Minister Badr Bas Salama said addressing existing challenges between central and local authorities requires continued dialogue and practical solutions to reinforce partnership and institutional integration.
Meanwhile, in the development sector, Minister of Planning Afrah Azzouba has discussed mechanisms for incorporating recommendations for Yemen's Women's Summits into the National Development Plan, as part of efforts to strengthen women's participation in development, peace building, and decision making. During a meeting in Aden with members of the Women's Summit Coordination Committee, the minister emphasized the importance of integrating the women, peace, and security agenda into national development priorities and strengthening cooperation between government institutions and civil society organizations. Azzouba highlighted ongoing efforts to improve international cooperation, enhance coordination with government agencies, and engage development partners to ensure support is directed toward national priorities, particularly in the education and health sectors. Participants stressed the importance of translating the outcomes of 8 consecutive women's summits into practical policies and development indicators that reflect the needs and aspirations of Yemeni women across political, economic, and social sectors.
And at the United Nations, Yemen has called on the Security Council to take a firmer stance against individuals and entities accused of undermining state institutions, obstructing the political process, and threatening peace and stability in the country. Addressing the Security Council's open session on Yemen, Ambassador Abdullah Saadi said the government is prepared to cooperate fully with the United Nations and sanctions committees to ensure accountability for those involved in violating national and international commitments. The government stressed that recent developments have confirmed that Yemen's crisis is no longer merely an internal conflict, but part of a broader regional challenge driven by the Houthi militia's ties to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. The statement warned that the militia continues to use Yemeni territory to threaten regional security, international shipping lanes, and global trade.
Yemen also renewed its call for stronger international action to curb Iranian support for the Houthi militia, describing it as essential to achieving lasting peace and stability in Yemen and the wider region. The government reiterated its commitment to a comprehensive political settlement based on agreed references, particularly UN Security Council Resolution 2216, while emphasizing that sustainable peace can only be achieved through restoring state institutions, ending armed groups' control over national decision-making, and ensuring that the state alone holds authority over the use of force. The statement also urged continued international pressure to secure the release of UN staff, humanitarian workers, and civil society activists detained by the Houthi militia, describing their detention as a serious violation of international humanitarian law.
In a related context, United Nations Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grandberg, has renewed his call on the Houthi militia to immediately and unconditionally release United Nations personnel, aid workers, and civil society activists detained by the militia.
I must recall that 73 United Nations personnel remain arbitrarily detained by Ansar Allah, many since the wave of detentions in June 2024. 2 years ago this month, alongside staff of NGOs, civil society organizations, and diplomatic missions. The Secretary General's recent statement underscored that these detentions violate international law, cause deep suffering to families, and constrain the United Nations' ability to assist millions of people in need. In its statement on the 6th of June, this Council condemned these detentions and demanded the unconditional, safe, and immediate release of those held. The United Nations will continue doing all it can to press for their releases, and I ask this Council to continue its efforts until our colleagues are freed.
The United Nations envoy also welcomed the economic and administrative reforms being implemented by the government, stating that such measures help ease the burden on citizens and contribute to economic and service stability in government-controlled areas.
The recent regional conflict has increased pressure on the Yemeni economy due to the country's import dependence and geopolitical proximity. This is raising the cost of imported food and fuel, amplifying inflationary pressures, and in recent weeks there have been protests in Aden and other governorates of electricity shortages amid the summer heat. The economic reforms prioritized by the government of Yemen should help improve living conditions, strengthen public revenues, and restore confidence in public institutions. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's recent $150 million grant to supply fuel to power stations is also critical to help address electricity shortages in government-held areas. Continued efforts by the government of Yemen to enhance security and ensure accountability for the deeply worrying recent assassination of public figures are also welcome. Such investments in security and economic stability is important to strengthen avenues for dialogue and consensus building, including on the southern.
Grandberg further noted that recent mediation efforts helped secure an agreement for the release of more than 1,600 conflict-related detainees and praised the role of Saudi Arabia, Oman, and regional partners in supporting the agreement.
Last month, the parties agreed to release over 1,600 conflict-related detainees after 14 weeks of negotiations in Amman under United Nations auspices. This is the largest release operation agreed in the history of the conflict. These negotiations were exceptionally challenging and complex. Trust was low, negotiations stalled multiple times, and it required courage and compromise. I commend the parties for their persistence to achieve this result, and I encourage them to make swift progress towards implementing the release operation with the support of the International Committee of the Red Cross. I'm particularly grateful to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for its critical role in supporting the talks, and to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan for hosting and supporting the negotiations. I'm also grateful to the Sultanate of Oman for hosting and supporting the previous round of talks in Muscat, which paved the way for this agreement.
And on the detainee file, head of the government negotiation team, Hadi Hage, has revealed new details on the recently signed agreement with the Houthi militia, aimed at ending the suffering of thousands of detainees and abductees. In an interview with SABA satellite channel, Hage described the agreement as the largest of its kind in recent years, saying it was reached after lengthy rounds of negotiations held in Muscat, Riyadh and Jordan.
Hage explained that the first phase of the agreement covers the release of approximately 1,700 detainees from both sides. The process will be supervised by the International Committee of the Red Cross through detailed verification mechanisms to ensure the accuracy of the records and confirm the details chosen by those being released. On the case of political leader Mohammed Qahtan, Hage stressed that the success of the agreement is closely linked to resolving his case. He said the deal includes formation of 4-party committee conferencing the government, the Houthi militia, Qahtan's family, and the Red Cross to visit him at his place of detention in Sana'a and assess his condition.
He warned that any obstruction of this process would delay implementation of the agreement, emphasizing that a medical assessment of Qahtan must precede the prisoner exchange. He added that the agreement also includes a broader 5-stage roadmap, beginning with the release of agreed detainees, followed by prisoner inspections, efforts to locate missing and forcibly disappeared persons, and eventually the recovery and exchange of remains from conflict front lines.
And in security affairs, Deputy Interior Minister for Human Resources and Finance Major General Qaid Atif has discussed enhanced cooperation with representatives of Geneva Call, focusing on training and capacity building programs for Interior Ministry personnel. The discussions covered initiatives aimed at strengthening the protection of civilians, facilitating the safe delivery of humanitarian assistance, and promoting compliance with international humanitarian standards. Both sides also reviewed proposals to introduce modern training models in cybersecurity and artificial intelligence as part of future professional development programs designed to improve institution performance in security and administrative fields. The meeting further addressed a joint program involving civil society organizations and the Ministry of Interior to promote the principles of international humanitarian law and human rights law, particularly in conflict-affected areas. The two sides agreed to continue coordination on future training initiatives aimed at strengthening institutional and humanitarian capabilities.
On maritime security, Coast Guard Chief Major General Khalid Al-Gamli has held talks with South Korean Ambassador to Yemen Kim Yong-sam on strengthening cooperation in maritime security and supporting Coast Guard capabilities. During the meeting, Al-Gamli outlined the Coast Guard's responsibilities in combating smuggling, conducting search and rescue operations, and protecting maritime navigation, while highlighting operational and technical requirements needed to enhance performance. The discussions also explored future cooperation in training, technical assistance, and capacity building programs aimed at improving the readiness and effectiveness of Coast Guard units. The South Korean ambassador reaffirmed his country's commitment to expanding cooperation with Yemen and praised the Coast Guard's role in securing territorial waters and international shipping routes.
In another meeting, Coast Guard Chief met with the Japanese ambassador to Yemen, Yuichi Nakashima, to discuss strengthening cooperation in maritime security and supporting the development of Coast Guard capabilities. The talks focus on future cooperation programs, technical assistance, and capacity building initiatives aimed at enhancing the Coast Guard's ability to protect Yemen's coastline and territorial waters. Al-Qumali reviewed the agency's ongoing efforts to secure maritime navigation, combat smuggling, and conduct search and rescue operations while outlining key operational and technical needs. He also praised Japan's continued support for Yemen and welcomed closer cooperation in areas related to maritime security and the protection of international shipping lanes. Ambassador Nakashima reaffirmed Japan's commitment to supporting maritime security institutions and promoting safe navigation in the region.
In Berlin, Yemen has signed an agreement with Germany's Winkelmann Museum Association to secure the future recovery of two cultural artifacts from the collection of late German diplomat Werner Daum. Under the agreement, the two artifacts will remain temporarily at the museum for conservation, preservation, and public exhibition purposes, while Yemen retains full ownership and the right to recover and transfer them through diplomatic channels at a late stage. The agreement represents another step in Yemen's broader efforts to protect its cultural heritage and recover antiquities removed from the country, while strengthening cooperation with international institutions dedicated to preserving historical artifacts.
IMTAZ, a training program on negotiation skills and humanitarian diplomacy, has concluded, bringing together security and military officials, civil society representatives, and community leaders. The course, organized by Miyun Organization for Human Rights in partnership with the Center of Civilians in Conflict, aimed to strengthen local capabilities or capacities in humanitarian access, civilian protection, and conflict-sensitive engagement. Participants received training in humanitarian diplomacy, protection, risk analysis, emergency response planning, and risk mitigation, while also reviewing local experiences in mediation and safe humanitarian access. The program further covered international humanitarian law and international human rights law, with a focus on empowering local actors to protect civilians and build channels for dialogue and coordination among relevant stakeholders in conflict-affected areas.
And in aviation news, the General Authority of Civil Aviation and Meteorology has called on regional and international aviation authorities, as well as Arab and foreign airlines, to resume or launch commercial flights to the country through Aden International Airport. In a circular issued Tuesday, the authority affirmed that Aden International Airport continues to receive flights and provide operational, technical, and navigation services in accordance with approved international standards, ensuring the safe and efficient movement of air traffic. The authority emphasized that the airport remains fully operational and capable of accommodating additional airlines and destinations, while offering the necessary support and coordination to facilitate new flight operations. That was the news bulletin from SABA satellite channel from Marib. Thank you for watching. Have a good time.
Have a good time.